Have you ever wondered what it might have been like to walk through the Garden of Eden? Alright, it looks like the riddle has been cracked. A team of investigators has at long last located the legendary Garden of Eden, after having spent ages looking for it. Many people around the world feel that the fact that this discovery has occurred has caused a wave of excitement in their region because it is a sign that the rapture is drawing near. It is stated that the Garden of Eden is an excellent place to visit due to the abundance of wonderful animals and verdant vegetation that can be found there. People are now looking forward to a brighter future and are excitedly anticipating their ecstasy as a result of its discovery. The book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament, describes the biblical Garden of Eden as the paradise on earth where Adam and Eve resided until they were cast out of the presence of God for breaking God's rules and being cast out of the sight of God. The book of Genesis and the book of Ezekiel both refer to it as the Garden of the Lord, who is the God of Israel. According to one theory, the Akkadian word Edenu, which translates as plain, was derived from the Sumerian word Eden. According to the account of creation and the fall of humanity found in Genesis, rivers flowed from the Garden of Eden to all four corners of the world. The concept of a paradise on earth was prevalent in early Middle Eastern mythology, because there are similarities to this idea in writings that date back to the Sumerian culture. The theological use of mythical notions, the story of the Garden of Eden aims to explain how humanity got from a position of innocence and happiness to their current state of understanding sin, misery, and death. This is accomplished through the use of the myth of the fall of man. We learn from Genesis 2:4-3:24 that after fashioning Adam from dirt, God placed two trees in the Garden of Eden as symbols of good and evil respectively, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. These trees are referred to as the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, respectively. In addition to tending to the Garden of Eden and naming the animals that lived there, Adam was given one more instruction from God: do not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. When Adam needed assistance, God caused him to fall asleep and then fashioned Eve from one of Adam's ribs. These two individuals had such good intentions that they were willing to take off their shirts in public as a married couple. But the crafty serpent in the garden persuaded Eve into eating the forbidden fruit and then delivering some to Adam to consume as well. They decided to cover themselves with fig leaves after their eyes were finally awakened and they realized they were exposed. As soon as God became aware of their transgression, He passed a sentence on them. He condemned the women to endure pain during childbirth and to be subject to the authority of men, and He condemned the men to a cursed earth where they would have to toil for their sustenance. After driving them out of the Garden of Eden and placing an angel guarding the entrance, armed with a sword of fire to prevent them from returning, God clothed them in the skins of various animals. Jesus was not raised to the heavenly realm, but rather to the earth. We mustn't get the ascension and the resurrection confused. There was no one buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Although it was evident that Jesus' body had been transformed after his resurrection, it was nonetheless the very same physical corpse that had been placed to rest in the tomb. This resurrection is the initial manifestation of the general resurrection that will take place. In addition, our physical bodies will be resurrected in a manner that will make it possible for us to inhabit the new heavens and the new earth. Although we may not have a clear picture of how exactly this will play out, we are confident that we shall be like Him. Christianity is known as the religion of the resurrection. The problem of sin is not presented in the first chapter of the Bible. Rather, it begins with the splendor of the earth. Despite all of the unexpected turns that the biblical narrative takes, God never wavers in His dedication to His creation. When seen in this light, it is astonishing that a significant number of Christians hold the opinion that earthly things are, at best, temporary and at worst, something that should be abandoned. This false notion is thoroughly debunked in the first chapters of Genesis. The final victory over everything God has produced will ultimately belong to God and not to Satan. It is not going to be thrown away, but rather rescued. The breadth of this rescue mission takes into account everything that has been knocked down. Hence, it should not come as a surprise that the Bible refers to the successful completion of this rescue as new heavens and a new earth. The words "God created the heavens and the earth" appear in the first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, while the last verse of the Bible refers to a new heaven and a new earth. Knowing God's plan to replenish the earth helps Christians make connections between what they learn on Sunday mornings and the rest of the week, molding their mission as they discover significance in all of the work they do here on earth. The earth that God created is not a sterile, colorless machine that serves any practical purpose. It is brimming with splendor, vividness, and inventiveness. God proclaimed it to be very good when He saw it. When God created the world, He did not spare any detail, but He did reserve heaven for those who reach there. The world is not perfect in the way that we would like it to be. Every aspect of our existence is fraught with pain and anguish. The planet itself is not to blame for this issue by any stretch of the imagination. It is brought about by the introduction of sin. The Bible reveals that God intends to rectify this situation by fulfilling His promise to send Jesus to earth to deal with the issue of sin. This begins in Eden, where God walks with Adam in the garden, and it continues as the glory of God is revealed in the tabernacle, in the temple, in the incarnation, in the crucifixion, in the resurrection, and the gifting of the Holy Spirit. When Jesus returns, it will not be for a brief visit, during which He will pick us up and transport us to another location. He is going to remain for some time. It is said in Revelation 21 that the New Jerusalem will come down to earth, and at that time, the splendor of God's creation will be restored and renewed. The book of Genesis opens with the creation of the heavens and the earth, but it quickly focuses on a specific garden that is referred to as Eden. This garden is where God chooses to make His home on earth with His people. In the ancient Near East, a temple was considered to be the dwelling place of a god. Eden is described using similar phrases. But this is not your typical temple in any way. It is not a lifeless structure, but rather a dynamic garden that is growing. Within this temple, God does not take the form of a lifeless statue. Rather, He strolls around and engages in conversation within the garden. The depictions of Adam and Eve that may be found in the temple are not carved from stone or wood. Rather, they are formed of human flesh and blood. Eden is reflected in all of Israel's subsequent tabernacles and temples throughout their history, since Eden was their inspiration. The Garden of Eden is often used as an example of what it must have been like when heaven and earth were brought together. Within the temple, those who bear the image of God are assigned responsibility. They are endowed with the vice-regal authority to oversee the progression of events in God's world, to be prolific and multiply, and fill the land and conquer it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the skies and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Because of this, human beings came into being. It goes right to the heart of the reason we have for being here. The phrase "to enter into a covenant with creation" has an odd tone when translated into English. How do the plants, animals, and rocks react to this? On the other hand, God says, "And I will make for them a covenant on that day with the beasts of the field, the birds of the skies, and the creeping things of the ground." When we think of a covenant, we think of a legally binding agreement between two parties who are both fully informed and have given their permission. On the other hand, the Hebrew word for covenant, berith, can also signify a unilateral promise. Abram was sound asleep during the time that God established the covenant with him. The various covenants that are described in the Bible each refer to an everlasting covenant, berith olam, that was formed with creation. In the agreements made with Noah, Abraham, Moses, Leviticus, David, and Israel following the Babylonian exile, this reference can be found. In a nutshell, God is devoted to the world that He created. His prior pledge to uphold all of His previous commitments serves as the foundation for the subsequent covenants that He enters into. There are two instances in which the Bible refers to the earth being completely wiped out. The first is at the time of Noah, during the Great Flood, and the second is with the final destruction of the earth by fire. Both of these occurrences are described in the book of 2 Peter chapter 3, which is located in the Bible, and is one of the chapters that is sometimes used as evidence that everything will be destroyed. But this begs the question, what exactly do we mean when we say something has been destroyed? The global catastrophe that occurred at the time of Noah may have rendered the world uninhabitable, but it did not wipe it out entirely. In 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10, it is said that, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burnt up and dissolved, and this earth and the works that have been done on it will be exposed." The concept is similar to that of a cleansing fire, which burns away the dross that represents flaws. Sin's dross will be separated from the gold, revealing the latter's unadulterated splendor. It is important what we do here on earth. The plans that God has for a single nation, Israel, will have an effect on the course of history across the entire planet. Within the context of the belief that God is the proprietor of the entire globe, God picked one country, Israel, to be the people who would represent him on earth. Exodus 3:18-17 describes the Promised Land as being comparable to the Garden of Eden. They were commanded to settle there. The people of Israel had recently returned from their exile in Babylon and were in the process of reestablishing themselves in the land as the Old Testament came to an end. Nonetheless, they continued to look forward to the coming of a Messiah who would carry out the will of God. At the beginning of the New Testament, we are given an introduction to this Messiah. Jesus is the one who makes good on all of God's promises. God's intention in selecting one territory was to bring blessing to all of Earth's nations, and God's intention in selecting one nation was for the goal of bringing blessing to all of the world's nations. In the wake of Jesus' fulfillment of everything that Israel stood for, the New Testament begins the transition from a holy land to a holy earth, from Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the ends of the earth. This transition takes place as the New Testament moves from Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the ends of the earth. The culmination of this will be witnessed in the new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness lives, as prophesied in Revelation 21:1. Even though we can't see it, the new creation has already arrived and is taking shape. Yet, every once in a while, we get glimpses of it, similar to how a pregnant woman's belly could reveal an arm or a foot sticking out of it. One day it will inevitably burst forth into existence, just like a newborn infant is forced out of the womb. Let's discuss a little bit more about this rebirth because it's going to play a big part in the conclusion of this story. We mustn't forget the fact that it would be very simple for us to forget some of the specifics here. For the sake of describing this occurrence, John employs apocalyptic symbols and metaphors. In many ways, the prophets in the Old Testament did with poetry. He was not providing a transcript that was as accurate as a video recording of what was to follow. Instead, he was striving to convey an incomprehensible belief, for which metaphors and symbols are sometimes the only adequate means of expression. This begs the question, what signs does he employ to communicate this sense of optimism for the future? John had a symbolic vision of this tremendous rebirth, and in it, he saw a new heaven and earth. This is a direct reference to the commencement of the biblical story. Amazing! So what did it look like? After that, he showed me a river of the water of life. It was as clear as crystal, and it was coming from the throne of God and of the Lamb. It was flowing through the center of the city's street. On either bank of the river stood a tree that bore 12 different kinds of fruit and produced new fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were used to heal the nations, and the tree itself was known as the Tree of Life. It's like a brand new version of Eden, a paradise where you can spend eternity with God. This is a picture of the prophetic reverberations from the Old Testament that reach back to the first pages of Genesis. John had the opportunity to see the Tree of Life, which was open to everyone and bore fruit in perpetuity. This was possible because its roots were connected to the everlasting river of life. This river can provide sustenance to all of God's new creation, since it originates from the very presence of God himself. On the other hand, in John's description of a garden, humanity was not symbolized by a married couple. John relates seeing people from all nations there, toiling away at the garden in the same way that Adam and Eve did in the book of Genesis. According to John, the accomplishment of God's will via Jesus would lead to the restoration of people to their rightful place as co-rulers of the world that God had created. Humans would then be prepared to collaborate with God to lead creation into unexplored territories. Yet this is not merely a return to the garden. Rather, it is a stride forward into the New Jerusalem, a magnificent metropolis in which all of the world's civilizations, in all of their myriad forms, can coexist with one another in peace and harmony before God. John began his description of the new creation by comparing it to a marriage between heaven and earth. Jacob had a dream in which he saw a stairway leading down from God's heavenly dominion to earth. Heaven is depicted as both a city and a bride, and it descends from God's heavenly domain to land on earth. John referred to the newly formed metropolis as the New Jerusalem. Because it was so wonderful, the only way he could explain it was in terms of glittering gems. John saw the city of Jerusalem as a potent emblem in and of itself. It was the first city where monarchs honored the genuine Creator, and it was also the only city in which God lived permanently in a sacred abode. Jerusalem, which was situated in the very center of the Israelis' promised land, symbolized the ultimate promised land, which was all of restored creation. The coming together of heaven and earth is symbolized by John as the descent of a new Jerusalem. The majority of Israel's kings were responsible for the corruption and dishonoring of the old city of Jerusalem, but the new city of Jerusalem was going to be controlled by a heavenly monarch. This new city would not be constructed by the hands of humans, but rather by God. It is the promise that is made throughout the Bible's narrative, that one day the realm of God and our realm shall be entirely fused. Everything will be remade into a new form. Life will emerge in its place after death. The entire planet will be transformed into a garden as beautiful as the one in the temple, and that glory will surround it. By the resurrection power of Jesus, every nation on earth will be showered with blessings, and the personal presence of God will pervade every nook and cranny of the newly created world. There is not even a single verse in the Bible that alludes to someone going to heaven after they have passed away. Regarding life after death, neither the Old Testament nor the New Testament ever uses the expression, "go to heaven." Never even once. This does not mean that the Bible is silent on the topic of what happens to those who follow God after they have passed away. Quite the contrary. Simply put, this indicates that the authors of the Bible did not conceive of getting to heaven in the way that we do today. Both the original creation and a subsequent new creation serve as the bookends of the Bible. Nothing else makes any kind of sense unless sins are confessed and a person submits themselves to the lordship of Jesus. Nevertheless, this is not the final chapter in the tale. It is only when we recognize that Christian hope is the rebirth of all things that existence acquires any sense of significance. Christian communities are to be appreciated for how they are a blessing to the locations in which they make their homes. If the power of the gospel is allowed to affect our lives, then our places of employment, our families, our marriages, our friendships, and even the world itself will be changed. God is concerned about what happens in this material world. That's all for the video today, and we will be right back with more. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.